Thank you for coming. My name is Joe Grand, and this is a presentation called Troublemakers and Superpowers, and it's a little bit different than what I normally talk about. Right? Normally I talk about technical things. This is something, figured I'd mix it up a little bit and talk a little bit about some personal kind of stories and ultimately hopefully seeing how we can all kind of, we all have our troublemakers, and sometimes we can take those and use them to some advantage to like succeed in whatever way we define that. But just something a little bit different, right? And leave us with this, hopefully, a sense of community. And some of the stuff in here I haven't talked about before, so hopefully I don't bum you out, and we can see some positive stuff that comes out of this. So this book, I have to say, I stole the title and a lot of the graphics from my wife, Keely. Her book just came out a couple days ago called Troublemakers and Superpowers. This is a book about different types of people that have had struggles in their life, whether it's trauma or mental health issues or other things, and we're able to use those in some way to move forward, right, and take a step forward. And I know a lot of us have troublemakers, and some of them we can use to our advantage, and some of them we can't. But it's a part of our story, and it's something that's really important, especially in like the hacker community, where a lot of us think differently, and like we're here for a reason, and you'll see kind of how I fell into this as well. It's kind of cool, and this is meant, for kids, but also you might find something interesting in there. So anyway, that's kind of what it's based on. Yeah, my name is Joe Grand, and it's really hard to actually be up here, right? So it's actually harder to talk to people that you know than it is to like a bunch of strangers in a big room. And this is very, very cool because like we're in Portland, and so many people here come every year, and like we have such great communities of things going on. So this is actually trickier for me, especially also because it's not technical, right? It's like this is hard stuff, but hopefully you'll get something out of it. Oh, also, yeah, so we have everybody here, but we are live streaming, like the introduction said, to the internet for people who are either watching live or watching later. So I wonder if we can all just yell, "Hi, internet," and welcome everybody outside of this room. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Hi, internet. Nice, okay, good job. You passed the first test. So this is me. I love computers. I grew up using computers, fascinated by computers, and it's something that, at the time wasn't cool to do, right? I think most of you can kind of relate to that, of like, using computers wasn't something really interesting until maybe like the past, 5 or 10 years, where people are like, oh, use computers, you must be smart. But back in the day, it wasn't that way. A friend of mine had said, like, being involved in computers is a great way to get stuffed into a locker. And that was kind of what it was like. When we were walking into BSides today, a group of us, somebody working on campus said, "You all must be here for BSides." And it's like, how did you know? So there must be something about us that stands out in a good way. Yeah, this is something that the computer, I don't exactly know why. I think it was either like having this power to do something with a computer, or nowadays, with technology in some way, that other people didn't have. And I thought that was really powerful, being made fun of in school and being teased by my family and tormented by teachers and everything. It's like, yeah, but I could still, steal your credit card information and go spend your money, or hack into whatever. And like, it was this power of like trading passwords to systems and doing all these things that normal people didn't do. And that's probably why I really liked it. And this is one of the quotes. These graphics, some of them are from the book, and it's like, it's me against the world. And that was something that I kind of dealt with for a long time, of like kind of having to prove myself. So yeah, this is the actual picture. I think I was 10 years old at the time in my computer room. So it could have been the power, but it also could have just been this sort of, being in like the solitude of being in the computer room, or like being connected to this world of bulletin board systems and people that you might not even know who they are physically, but you have this connection to them. And as I was working on this presentation, even last night, I'd messaged Keely, and I was looking at this slide. I'm like, I'm literally still doing this exact thing. Like, I'm in my computer room, it's quiet, like nobody's around, and I'm working on my computer. So it's funny how like some things don't change. And she's like, yes, you are doing that, but you've come a long way from, from this. So yeah, it was sort of the power and the solitude. This is my friend Josh, who is also in the book for a completely different story. And we met in kindergarten in the timeout booth. He wasn't a nerd, but he kind of watched me do nerd things. And we realized pretty early on, right, like when we were getting in trouble for some reason in kindergarten, like we didn't really fit in, right? It's like, who gets in trouble in kindergarten? I know that like when our kids got in trouble in kindergarten, we're like, okay, there's probably something that they're trying to say, or maybe they can't get it out or do something. So we kind of tried to figure that out. But in our case, we just kept getting in trouble. And sometimes we would get in trouble for things that we did, and sometimes we would get in trouble for things that we didn't do, and we just got blamed for it because that was kind of just our energy or whatever it was, right? We didn't fit in. He's done a lot of great stuff, a lot different than me, but he teaches, and he teaches writing at a community college, and he teaches poetry to inmates, and he fights Nazis, and is very defensive of the community. And I think that was like really, really powerful. And for me, being somebody who doesn't actively go out and do those things, I contribute in different ways, and like seeing that is very like kind of inspirational for me to see that. So it's kind of cool how we had these different paths, but we connected because of this. Whatever was in our heads and whatever the troublemakers were that we had brought us together, right? Just like we are here together because of what we love. At the same time as discovering technology, I discovered punk rock and hardcore, and I was like 8 years old, right? So this stuff was so normal to me. Of like my brother, I have an older brother, he's 6 years older. He had a friend that had a Circle Jerks tattoo. So it was like the skanking guy from their, I don't know, one of their albums. But he had a huge tattoo on his arm, and this was like 1985, and it's like, who had tattoos back then? So I was just fascinated with that. I just loved everything about it. Like the music spoke to me in a way that nothing else did besides technology, which is kind of weird, right? Because you have this chaos of punk rock and hardcore and fighting against the system and all this stuff, but then at the same time, I loved being alone in my room. So it was this, I guess with everything, there's this balance. So yeah, I got involved in skateboarding, in going to shows, and I was in a band, and all of these things that nobody liked. Like if you were a skateboarder, people didn't like you. If you were into punk rock or metal, or like if even nowadays, right, you have long hair, like people look at you, they're like, oh, he must be a little bit, they must be doing something a little bit different if they can have long hair, whatever it is. And it really does change people's behavior based on what you look like, right? And it's very strange to notice that. So yeah, got involved in this and still am involved, right? Like I still listen to new bands, and the old stuff still really hits me, but it's realizing, like I didn't realize it at the time that this is different. But to me, it was all normal, right? Just like the hacking was normal, and the music was normal. But I didn't realize until probably like 5 or 10 years ago of like, oh, these are like small communities. But that's what's important. And I felt really comfortable in those communities of just showing up and like, doesn't matter what you wear, doesn't matter what you do, you go nuts at the show, and as long as you feel it and believe it and help out. And there's a lot of DIY aspects of punk and hardcore that flow over to the hacker world, and like, I don't know, it made sense to me. At that same time too, growing up, I built a lot of electronics because I'm a hacker and I love building electronics. Most of the stuff I built were things to screw with other people or to abuse the telephone system or whatever it was. I built this is like a universal garage door opener, so basically replacing the dip switches with like a 555 counter, or 555 and a decade counter or whatever, binary counter, to cycle through all the possibilities. And I wasn't stealing stuff from the garages at that point, but it still was a cool kind of hack. What else? Like different types of like blue boxes, red boxes to screw with the phone system. This was like a laser listener. This was pre-NSA playset, but basically trying to mimic, what can the government do of spying on somebody through a window. So using a laser to modulate. Had like, what else? This was like a device that you could plug into the phone line and still use the phone as normal, but if somebody tried to call in, like the teacher or the Secret Service or the phone operator or whatever, it would be a busy signal. So my parents would never receive the phone calls that I was, terrified of them having. And then this was something that I used in school. So this was just like a high frequency generator. And, with high frequency sound, you can't really tell where they're coming from because they're bouncing all over the place. So I would, turn this thing on in school. This was in like a Sucrets tin, so like a cough drop tin. And I'd leave it on the table. And then, everybody would be like, what's that sound? Where's that coming from? And it was great. I don't think I ever got in trouble for that one. What you don't see here is like the stun gun that I built so I could like shock my friends and other people. Yeah, just a lot of sort of like what I would call technological juvenile delinquency, coupled with being an actual juvenile delinquent. And those are things also that I didn't realize until later. Like I was talking with Josh recently, and he had said that we were juvenile delinquents. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, we weren't that bad. He's like, really? Like, yes, we were juvenile delinquents. And there usually comes a reason for that, right? Like, if you're doing things, again, there's usually a reason behind it. There's a long story between that picture and this picture. But we can basically say, being involved in the hacking community at that time was less about helping the community and more about exploiting everything else against society, right? It was sort of like doing what I could against big business and blah, blah, blah. And this, I basically got arrested for breaking into a telephone company building to get documentation and materials and things. And I was in Michigan with a hacker group at the time. And it's like, well, why were you in Michigan as a 15, 16-year-old when you're from Boston? And I don't know why my parents let me go. But basically, a bunch of us who are online doing stuff, we had a group called Renegade Legion. You can go to textfiles.com and check out all of our awesome text files from back in the day. But yeah, we thought it'd be like a good idea to break into this place. And this was after like a couple days of other stuff that we didn't get caught for. But this was sort of that turning point of like, oh, okay, that's a problem. But this is sort of where it's like, all right, well, why is Joe even telling us like this bio kind of thing? And the point here is like everything that has happened in your life has brought you to where you are. And some of that's good, some of that's not good. I just read a quote recently that was like, if you wish you could have done stuff differently, congratulations, you're growing, right? So it's like, there are things I look at and it's like, oh, it would have been nice if I did that differently, or if I wasn't such an asshole and like did other, constructive things. But then at the same time, it's like, yeah, well, then I wouldn't have met my wife. I wouldn't have had this family. I wouldn't be in Portland. Like, there's all these things that if you change one thing, it could really affect other things. So it's sort of acknowledging like, yeah, I had kind of a tormented childhood. And in my family, I think one of the reasons, not getting to like psychotherapy or whatever, but like looking back at this, it's like I had, very little emotion in the family. Nobody was paying attention to me. So this was like, yeah, I was reaching out and trying to screw with people to get attention. And now it's obvious to look back at that. My parents kind of disagreed. They're like, well, you had a great childhood, like a nice house, place to go, your computer room, but not the emotion. And not everybody needs emotion. It turns out I did. So I was acting out in ways. And the same thing, like finding those communities, the hardcore scene at the time, and then the Loft, which I'll talk about next, those were my communities, right? Like those were where not only I had attention and I was seen, but I could see other people and we could work together. And like that's kind of what this all is. So history matters, and thinking about your history matters, and acknowledging your history matters. My dad also, by the way, was a doctor, and he had just admitted recently of like, we raised our kids as fellows. What are they? Like research fellows at a hospital. So it was a very like mentorship relationship. And like that works maybe for research fellows, but not quite for kids. So anyway, it's like kind of realizing all this stuff later, and I don't blame them for it, obviously. Like I take responsibility, but I understand like they had their things. They had their troublemakers, and it all comes together, right? So like we are the way we are for some reason, and that's okay because we're all different and we all have different things to bring regardless of kind of those things that have happened, as long as we can try to take those and turn them into some positive thing. The real turning point after getting in trouble was joining the Loft. And again, this was where community really came into play, of me realizing, oh, like, this is cool. I can be a hacker, and I can do what I love, but I can share information and share my passion and work with people that believe the same things. So I'm not going to go into all the details of like the history of this stuff, because you can find it online. But these guys were basically 6 years older than me, and I was just a kid joining this group of people that had a hackerspace in Boston area hackers. And I still to this day don't know why they let in a 15-year-old kid, but they did. And they had, all they've said is like, well, you stopped doing dumb stuff, so we let you in. But like, I know I wouldn't hang out with 15-year-olds when I was like 20-something. But anyway, this became a group where, you know, we would find security vulnerabilities and force vendors to fix problems and all these things and go to conferences and share things. So that was pretty cool. But still on the inside, it was like I still was kind of struggling with building this reputation and like publishing papers and giving talks and all of these things. I didn't know why. It was like I started running also after I got arrested because I had to either do a sport or get a job, like to stay busy. And I was like, I'm not going to work. So I started running, which was a really good outlet for things. But I had this desire of like I needed to do well. Like I needed to win or try to win and like be recognized, right? So it was still this thing, like this baggage, still with me, even when people are like, the legendary hacker group, you guys testified in front of Congress and did this and that. It's like, yeah, that's great. But is that feeding me? Like, not really. As far as like moving forward from there, and I think this is this combination of the Troublemakers and Superpowers and what the superpowers I have, or I guess you could say what the Troublemakers have left me as, or turned me towards, is like, you know, kind of independent, kind of taking no shit sort of thing. Also very stubborn and not flexible in what I'm doing. And sometimes that can be great. Like if you're starting working on a project or doing, you know, trying to like license a product to a big company where you're negotiating against lawyers. Like it's always fun to do that. But at the same time, like those are not traits that are always good, especially if you want to work with other people. So it's kind of acknowledging like, okay, those are great superpowers, but like everything is a balance. Around the same, so after I graduated college, kind of around the same time as the Loft, I became a professional engineer because you couldn't be a professional hacker. Hacking was like a fun thing to do and like got some press and whatever, but it wasn't a career path. So I became an engineer, worked on a lot of products, and that was really cool to see kind of build something that comes from your mind that helped people. And I had spent a lot of time working on a portable infusion pump that was the first portable infusion pump, you know, in hospitals, and you have the IV bag and everything. Before this thing had come out, you were stuck at the bedside. And then this portable thing gave people some freedom to move around. And once we passed like the human testing phase of the product, it was really amazing to see, because it's like, wait, I just built something that like will let somebody leave their hospital bed, or at least go out into the hallways of the hospital. Like that's a really powerful thing. So I really loved engineering, but at the same time, it's like straddling that fence of being a hacker and the Loft. And eventually, all of us at the Loft were like, we want to be hackers full time. And everyone's like, you are crazy. But we joined forces with some venture capitalists, which was a horrible idea, by the way. If there's any VCs in the room, sorry. It changed the whole mentality, right? If you're a hacker, it's very hard to take money from somebody and then continue being a hacker when the person who gave you money wants to make money. Those two things can't usually go together. And I realized that very quickly. I was still like 20-something years old, and realized like, okay, the fun has left. Like if you're being forced to do something, it's not the way, like the Loft wasn't how it was anymore. We were supposed to be this research group within the company. It didn't work. So I ended up quitting. And I think that's part of like my mindset of like, if it's not fun, I'm not going to do it. And sometimes that's a great thing if you have the capacity to do that. At the time, I was just young enough and dumb enough of like, I don't like you guys anymore. I'm going to stop working with you. Didn't have any responsibilities. But even to this day, like there's still some self-sabotage in here of like, no, I just don't want to work. I don't want to do that. I don't want to work with you. I don't want to work on this. Like, I'll just say no because I feel like it. There's one project that actually recently, the JTagulator, which is a tool that I built, like a hardware hacking tool, open source, and sold for 10 years, and just one day I'm like, I don't want to sell it anymore. Like, I don't want to support it. And anybody in a business world would be like, you're crazy. Like, it's helping people and you're selling it. And I was just like, no, I don't want to do it. So now it's not being manufactured anymore, and it's still open source, and hopefully Peter Esden will take it and roll it into Glasgow or something like that. But sometimes I'm not making the best decisions, but it feels right, and it feels good to do those things. And so I don't really care the end result. Is bad business? Sure. Like, I had a friend once say, a very well-known tech person that had started a website sort of like Reddit, but before Reddit, and like totally crashed and burned at the end. He turned into a venture capitalist, and he was like, Joe, like, all you do is sit around and like hack on things or teach classes. Like, you should be building companies. And I'm like, I don't want to build a company. Like, that doesn't feel right to me. Like, no, I don't want to do it. So yeah, maybe there's missed opportunities, but again, it's following your heart based on kind of your own history. The intro bio had mentioned Prototype This. That was a really cool opportunity to share engineering with people. So it was kind of taking that love of sharing and technology, building crazy projects. There was 4 of us. And this was another thing kind of like the Loft, of realizing everybody has these different skills, and you can work together to do really cool stuff. And it's sort of respecting other people's skills at the same time as respecting your own skills and not stepping on each other. And like, we all had very distinct personalities and distinct skill sets, but it was really, really fun to kind of do that. What was not fun is having the producer say, okay, we're going to start filming at 6 a.m. to get the shot with the nice sun. And I'm like, no, like, you can't tell me what to do. He's like, but you're on the show. Like, you need to be on the camera. So again, it was this sort of like, I don't want you to tell me what to do. It turned out okay. And then recently, sort of going more into like kind of, unfortunately, I've been kind of grouped into like cryptocurrency, wallet hacking, because basically like during COVID lockdown, the short version, like somebody contacted me, was locked out of their Trezor hardware wallet, and was like, can you hack it? And put together like my little process based on existing work, and we made a video about it that went viral, and now there's like millions of crazy crypto people that are wanting to like come over to my house and hack their devices. So that was sort of an unintended consequence, but it still comes back to sort of the love of hacking. And what I didn't realize at the time, and what I realize now of doing it more, of like having a power to help somebody. And even though it's cryptocurrency, and a lot of people crap on cryptocurrency and the meanings behind it and the risks and all of this stuff, like, to still be able to help somebody recover money that maybe was like their last $1,000 that they had put into their bank account to try to grow, right? Or like whatever it is, they get locked out of something. A lot of people are getting scammed, which I can't help with, but to help somebody in some way is cool, regardless of what it is, whether it's medical or cryptocurrency or whatever, right? And like, we all have those skills to be able to help people. Okay. So this is where I'm going to try something new. We're going to have a little fireside chat. How are we doing on time? We're doing pretty good. Okay, so I have no idea if this is going to work. So this is a huge room, by the way. It's amazing. Does anybody have any thoughts, or like, does anything stand out to them, like of your own troublemakers or superpowers, or something you want to share related to this, or even a question about something? So it's sort of like discussion, but not at the end of the talk, kind of like in the middle. Like, is there anything that resonates with you, which is kind of a big ask, right? Like, I don't know if anybody's going to stand up and say something in public in this environment, but that's fine. And oh, I see some hands. This is amazing. No, maybe I should, here, I'm going to walk down there and give it to you. I'm just curious, right? I mean, I don't want to hog the stage just telling a story about me, because that's not the community. Oh, there's another mic. Okay, thanks. Joe will be the mic distributor.
I would start by asking the room, how many people here associate personally with everything you said and see themselves in you?
Ooh, that's a good question. Right. A few. Cool. A little bit. Yeah, I mean, I guess how many people, even if you don't have to share it, like how many of you have some sort of thing that you're aware of like something in the past that has shaped you? Pretty much everybody, right? And like, that's cool. Awesome. I feel like Dr. Phil or something. I didn't anticipate this. Okay, let's see.
Okay, so less about me. I am raising a troublemaker who is in preschool and trying to figure out if you have any advice or anybody else has any advice on how to help him reconcile the difference between teachers and schools' expectations of him and my expectations, which are you interact with the world physically and you need to interact with the world physically, and that is how you learn, and he is wicked smart. But as a 4-year-old, we're already starting to get in trouble.
Yes.
For pushing those boundaries.
So I can tell you my suggestion, and then people might have their own also, but it's what we found. Our kids also were sort of the same way, like really, really smart. And a lot of times if there's an imbalance of like you're really talented in one thing, there might be something else you're struggling in, and that sort of acting out might be related to that. It might also be they just want to learn more or do something. But when we found like one of our kids when they were younger, actually in preschool, one of them ended up getting in like an actual debate with the preschool teacher. And he was like 4 years old. And the preschool teacher called us in and he's like, we need to have a meeting. So we had this face-to-face meeting and we're like, well, first of all, why did you let a 4-year-old get under your skin? And what was the end result? Do you remember? Like, I don't remember what the battle was, but he was feeling something. Yeah. Yeah, it was a long time ago. But it was something, right? There was something there. And then when they were in like early grade school, every Wednesday, they would get kicked out of the classroom. And we're like, what the hell is going on? Like, this is, like, he's such a nice kid. Why is he getting kicked out? What's going on? And then we realized that on Wednesdays, around that time, is when the fire drill was happening. And we go, oh, so he's getting kicked out of class because it's not as loud outside the classroom than it is inside the classroom. And that was like mind-blowing, right? It's sort of like babies cry because they have something to say. Kids act in different ways because they have something to say and can't say it. Teenagers act dumb because they're teenagers, but also because they maybe have something to say. Adults, the same thing. Like we can maybe emote better or express ourselves better, but not always, right? So there's all these things. So it might just be like talking to your child and saying like, how are you feeling, right? Like, where are you feeling something? And then talking to the teachers too and trying to figure out if it might be some completely unrelated thing that's causing that reaction. Does anybody want to add to that? Oh, yeah, we have so many hands. Get a team, yeah. So Keely says, get a team, like get people that support you and that you know that can stand up for your kid. Because once we found people outside the school that were like, your son has OCD and anxiety and is sensitive to sounds, and it's like, oh, good. Now we can go to the school and say, this is the problem that we need to handle, or this is the troublemaker that we need to handle. And now they're like completely flourishing. And that has turned into the superpower, which is why the book was originally created anyway, to inspire kids like ours to relate to somebody.
So I'm listening to your story, and I think it's so fascinating because I was a punk rocker hacker in Boston in the 80s, right? I kind of wonder if we knew. I'm looking up, I'm like, oh, I saw those bands or whatever.
Yeah.
But there's a few different things. It's like when you talk about your story and you're like, my computer room, and I'm like, you had a computer room?
Yeah.
Wait, ready? You had a computer?
Yes.
So, I mean, a lot of this, too, is when you even talk about the mentorship of, like, you know, a 15-year-old being, you know, pulled into this hacker group, and you're like, that was weird. Well, how about a 15-year-old girl?
Yes.
Suddenly that has a very, very different
yeah, it's right.
Almost why that
different opportunities present themselves, maybe. Or
also risk.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about here. So some of it is girl troublemakers, especially during that time, were treated very, very differently than the boys. And you even look, too, is the community, being in the punk rock community, that also had a lot of risk and non-acceptance. So I think some of that is, and you can look at other groups, too, that, you know, I hate using the word, but there's a certain amount of gatekeeping that kind of happened during that time that makes it like who didn't get to be in there. And even in this room right now, we kind of still see it. So at some point, I want to like sit down and talk about what shows we're at.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
What was the name of your band, by the way?
Well, so it was called Abolition. It's actually on Bandcamp. It's, yeah. It was fun. But no, you're right. Like, especially I think we see this just with inclusiveness and diversity and acceptance. And it's like, I have the privilege and the opportunity to stand up here and tell my story, but some people will never get that opportunity based on their experiences or other people's feelings of them. I will say, like at the Loft, we were kind of gatekeeping our community because we were not an open hackerspace. We were a closed group, but then we would still hang out with people. So it was kind of this community of ourselves and then hanging out with other hackers. With the women girl hackers at the time, we had Lady Ada, Limor Freed, who runs Adafruit, Window Snyder, who's been all over lots of different companies making huge changes in security. So we tried to accept everybody, but you're right, like it doesn't happen all of the time. And those days, yeah, even having a computer, and I think being younger, like there is sort of this aspect of that power and control thing, but having the mentorship and learning to not be that way, I thought was really, really important. Any other fireside chat comments?
I think for me, probably one of the most interesting things is talking back to your child. I think we teach kids not to explore. When we get them into school, even in houses, we teach them, don't do that, do this. This is the right way to do it. And I'm wondering, what do you think we can do to change that mentality?
Yeah, that's it's a hard one, especially because so many schools now are just teaching for the testing, right? It's like kids in kindergarten they already have homework. They don't get a lot of time to be themselves. And it's a very systemic problem because everybody is just testing, and kids don't get to be kids. And I think especially with technology too, not even get into the whole mental health issue of like watching other people on YouTube and successful, YouTube famous people and comments and all these other things. So it's almost like you have to supplement that with outside of school because they're in school for a certain amount of time and that does make a huge difference. But like what we have at home now is our younger kid got super into making slime, different types of slime, like fidget sort of slime. And I think the tactile they really like, the chemistry they really like. So we set them up with a table and bought a bunch of like stuff in bulk, glue and the boric acid, and just let them do their thing and explore and play. And it's very hard a lot of times to be like, don't do that, because it like makes a mess. But it's like, all right, that is the defined space to do that, and it's fine. So I guess it's just sort of trying to foster that outside of the school environment and come to hacker spaces or come to an event and explore, like take stuff apart, right? Like find stuff on the street and take it apart and look at it. So I think it's just getting kids to realize it's okay to explore and experiment. In places like this, like we're mostly older. I see a bunch of kids in the back and kind of volunteers, but it's like you want to start that early and normalize it as far as like, yeah, this is something we should be doing, of exploring and questioning at the same time, questioning things. But yeah, getting your hands dirty, I guess. I don't know if that answers the question, but good. Any other?
Hey, Joe.
So
I just want to say thank you for speaking, but some of the things that I would be curious about is how do you differentiate between constructive criticism and hating? And what's your method of kind of slicing and dicing that?
That's a great question. I basically don't read any comments, and I don't take any criticism. So yeah, it's very, very hard. I found that, like, I really don't read comments, but if it's something where, like, somebody says face-to-face, like, oh, that was cool, but you should have added this, or I have a comment about this, like, that's a personal connection. But I think, personally, it's still really hard to take. And, like, comments, the reason I don't read them is, like, it actually hurts, right? It's like, what? That person shouldn't say that. Like, I'm going to go find them and beat them down. But it's like, that doesn't solve anything, first of all. But it, like, triggers something of like, they don't deserve to say that. Like, that's a mean thing or whatever. So, and there are positive comments too that I don't see because I don't see the other ones. And L0pht, the drummer of Rush, who was a very private person, but very talented, on-stage drummer, had said, if you trust the positive reviews, then you have to trust the negative reviews also. So I think a lot of it is like just ignoring the noise and just doing what I want to do. But then if somebody has an actual valid constructive criticism, like in person is different than online. But I try to just avoid anything and focus on like just things that I would like to do, which is a little bit selfish, but at the same time, it's like, again, it feels better because if somebody says something negative, like I will actually get stuck on it. I'll be like, they're right. Like the one person out of, thousands or millions of people, right? It's like, that person's right. And then I go for that, and it's like very hard to get out of that state. And I feel way better of just like ignoring all of it, and it's so great. Like when I have to log into YouTube to like change something, and it sees all these comments and thumbs up and thumbs down and everything, like my heart starts going, and I get all sweaty, and it's horrible. So I found like the peace is in not looking, and then learning and growing from what other people say, but in a human way, not an internet way. This fire, oh my God, did we go through the entire video? You saw him eat the marshmallow and everything? Wow, okay. So talking about community a little bit, I want to mention a lot of great stuff that's happening in Portland that you may or may not know about, but this comes all the way back to like fitting in and being together and kind of building these communities and being inclusive of everybody's differences or troubles or whatever it is. When I first moved to Portland, which was like 10 years ago now, Jared Boone, I don't know if he's in here, had brought me to see the Church of Robotron, and I know there's a bunch of Church of Robotron people in here. Woohoo! This is like a really, really cool project. I can't see my notes on here, but this is like an art project that got people together, and a lot of the DorkBot community were building this, and this was downtown at like an exhibition, and they go to different places still. Do you still go around? Been a minute, but trying, yeah. So I think that if you go to Control H, you can actually see the little trailer with the stuff in it. Just a really cool community project, and I was just blown away coming from San Francisco, where everything was very like tech, get famous focused, and it was really annoying. Like you'd go to events, and it's like, who do you know? Like, how can I get money for my new idea? Where coming to Portland, it was like, this is freaking awesome. Like these guys are hacking on an emulator and building things together. But go to the website and read the description. I think Carl wrote it. But it was just really powerful to see like art and hacking as community. And that really stuck with me. Futel, another one. A lot of the same guys, right? Woohoo. So providing the community with access to people and to connection. I haven't heard of this anywhere else in the world. And this is another thing, like when I moved here, I was like, this is like so cool to do this. And it's helping people in different communities, regardless of their situation, right? There's a lot of fear of like, well, people are gonna use these phones to sell drugs, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, but there's also a huge amount of people that need access to a phone. So there's this positive aspect. Again, this community in Portland is so special. DorkBot, so woohoo. Another group, right? A lot of the same people doing those projects, but it's something Jared also brought me to DorkBot when we first moved here. It was at Bunk Bar, right, on Water Street or something, and so easier for me to get to from Selwood. And but it was like this great feeling of belonging, very similar to feeling connected at a show or feeling connected to skateboarding and whatever it is. Like that community, like hanging out and learning from each other and eating and sharing, and like everybody has such cool stories. So DorkBot's one of those places that kind of bring people together. Control H, of course, which I think really is the glue that brings us all together throughout the year, not only hosting events, but having a place for everybody to go. And I will say, like, I know personally I feel like I should be doing more, like going there more, and like there's so many things to do, but also I don't know if I mentioned, like I'm kind of a hermit at the same time of like the computer room, right? Like I like being at home, and it might surprise you, but I'm not that social. Like besides being at events where I love being, like socializing's hard, right? Like being here for a lot of us is probably like, I love it, I love seeing everybody, I love being with everybody, but then it's like, I'm gonna go down to that quiet room and chill. So there are so many great opportunities if you don't know about them. And yeah, just very, very cool. And then I would be remiss to not mention BSides, right? We're all here. Yay, BSides, and thank you everybody for putting it on. And the description for the introduction talk was like, building an inclusive space for people. And we're just really, really lucky for what we have in Portland. I wouldn't even say luck, because it's the people that are building this, right? It's all of you that are contributing to these different projects and volunteering. It's what makes it what it is. And I personally am so grateful for it, even though I don't take advantage of it all the time. It's just knowing that there are these groups that surround you and that you have the opportunity to go to is just so, it just feels so good. So yeah, thank you to all of these groups. And then we have imposter syndrome, or at least I do. And a lot of other people do too, so I just wanted to mention it as far as, again, community and acceptance. This was a tweet, or an X, or a post, or whatever it's called, from last year. And this was somebody saying, I think they're based in Houston, of like, I'm second guessing myself as to whether I belong in InfoSec. And I know the answer is yes. Yes, everybody belongs, and again, talking about sort of gatekeeping of things from back in the day, I think we still see that now. It's hard for me to see it because I don't really get out of the house much, but if you are a woman or underserved or whatever else it is, there are still challenges. If you don't have a college degree, it's still a challenge to get into certain tech places, right? You still have these old school mentalities in some of these companies. And there will be challenges for people. But yes, everybody belongs. So there shouldn't even be a discussion. It's should I be an InfoSec or should I be a hacker or whatever you feel like being? Yes. That is the thing, is you belong no matter what. Doesn't matter what people say. Doesn't matter what people think. I'm going to leave you with this little thought exercise. I've always been fascinated with life growing from unlikely sources. And I should probably talk to a therapist about it. But it's really fascinating to me. This is something, I think I took this in 2002 or something, a little flower growing out of a bunch of little lava pebbles, this huge lava field in Hawaii. It's this one little flower growing out of that. And then we have some little cute moss growing on my backyard deck, right? I mean, if you live in the Pacific Northwest, you see this. This is so cool. That moss is I don't care where I am. I'm growing. I'm doing my thing. And just the other day, one of my kids came out and said, Daddy, there's moss growing on the wood. And it's yeah, that's what we get to see. Life growing out of things happening and growing from unlikely places. And then this is one of my favorites. There was a quote, and I don't have my notes, so I can't pronounce the name properly, but he was a Vietnamese monk. Was it Thich Nhat Hanh? Yes. He had a quote and has given some talks about no mud, no lotus. And he had mentioned that. I'd heard that on something. I didn't mention I got into meditation with the Insight Timer app during COVID, and that has completely changed. That's when I started really reflecting on my past and stuff. Huge game changer. Even when you're trying to solve technical problems, right? Of getting meditating and not getting enlightenment, but just settling your brain and doing stuff was huge. So I'd heard about this no mud, no lotus, and that stuck with me so much. Of you have this beauty coming from mud or a struggle or something, and really it's you can't have beauty without having struggles, and there's a connection. And I just love that. This is one of my favorite things to look at, of if this lotus flower can grow out of the dredges of this thing and make life, right, and make color and do things, all of us can also. So I guess that's it. I do want to mention that BSides has generously and graciously offered to donate money to charities of my choice for giving the talk, which is awesome. It feels really good to be able to do that. So the two charities it's going to is A Doll Like Me, which makes dolls that look like a person who might have some sort of physical deformity. So kids they grab a doll, and a lot of times the doll, like Barbie, doesn't look like them. So this is a place that they can relate to seeing any sort of physical deformities, and like, I think that's pretty cool. And like now they see it, and it's like, okay, my doll looks different than other dolls, but like that's still me. Like that's really awesome. And I don't know how to say this, if it's pear or pee-ear, but this is like a local Portland group that helps at-risk youth and houseless youth and has a resource center, and they get to go out on adventures outdoors, which really helped me, running and getting out into nature, offering lots of resources. And I just thought, given my history as a kid, like to be able to help other kids like that is really cool. So yes, with that, hopefully you're not too bummed out. But this is kind of a thought exercise in not tech, but community, right? And thinking about our histories and how we can become that lotus regardless of the mud. But yeah, so thanks for listening and contributing and sharing, and enjoy the show.